Wondering what's the buzz? Then tune into Happy Hours for your dose of all that matters. The exclusive HR podcast by NHRDN in partnership with Timber Media, podcaster for India Inc.
Hi everyone and welcome to this edition of Happy Hours, the exclusive HR podcast by NHRDN. I am your host Roger Lashe. I am from the Young Advisory Board of NHRD Bangalore chapter, and I have with me today a very interesting HR leader, Mr. Saurabh Kale. Saurabh has more than 15 years of experience and currently manages the talent and leadership development at Zeta and Flock. He has formerly worked with Wipro, Practo and Grab, and has also been the first winner of the famous HR 40 under 40 mega event. He's an active blogger and loves embracing technology in the field of HR. Saurabh, we are happy to have you with us and welcome to Happy Hours.
Thank you, Roger. I'm equally excited to be here today. Thank you.
So we'll quickly get started, Saurabh. Our first segment is what we call bottoms up. Basically, what that means is for every heavy dose question that I ask you, you get to pour your heart out with honest and candid answers.
Bottoms up.
Bottoms up.
All right. So to get started, you won the first ever HR 40 under 40 mega event. And you work with a lot of young organizations and entrepreneurs. So what, in your opinion, should young HR professionals do to stand out from the crowd?
So it's interesting, and I want to start off with a disclaimer. I'm equally young, and I would like to give a suggestion to a younger audience, I would say, as apart from your core HR skills, which is around talent acquisition, talent development, being an HR business partner to your functions, and rewards and recognition or compensation and benefits, I'm going to urge all the HR folks out there to have a learning agility mindset. What it means is typically to kind of, keep on learning what's new, identify the trends that are coming by, for the future and adopt yourself or adapt to, those changing needs accordingly. The second thing I'm going to talk about is the growth mindset. So as you are, building your learning agility, a lot of times we fail, and it's absolutely all right, to fail forward as what we typically call. But just fail fast. I mean, your businesses needs you, and it's extremely important to kind of, have that growth mindset and not kind of, get bogged down with failures in life. The third thing I'm going to suggest is, to have resilience. The times are changing. We are in COVID times where including the entire work style and work from home or work at home has kind of become a norm. And we will need to build our resilience muscle. We will need to be a little more empathetic, emotionally intelligent towards our folks as well. The fourth thing I'm going to suggest is, have things or skills beyond HR. Have design thinking skills, understand how your users or your employees are able to kind of, take on your processes, challenge, some of the tools that you're currently using, and, build the newer norms or newer techniques that are important for the future. And last but not least, I'm going to say definitely invest in building your brand you, both internally, externally. When somebody recalls your name, they have to, or rather they need to have some thought, that, hey, I'm reaching out to this individual because he or she delivers on this. So build a brand for yourself out. Thank you.
Some very interesting points you've made there, Saurabh. I've in fact taken a lot of notes while you were talking. I'm sure that's going to come in handy. I want to go back to the whole learning agility that you spoke about, Saurabh, because there's a lot that's changed in the field of learning and development. And especially now that technology has brought learning to the comfort of our homes, more so during this current work from home scenario that we're all in. You two are quite a strong advocate of gamified learning, is what I've been told. So what do you think is the latest trend, so to say, in L&D that needs to be leveraged across organizations and industries?
Very interesting question. Though I have been an advocate of gamified learning, I think the recent trends are shifting towards having a very personalized learning which is very relevant and one that is digestible. So I came across this terminology called as Attawad, which is anytime, anywhere, any device. And these are the four components of today's learning is how I would like to propose, which is anytime, anywhere, any device kind of a learning. Learning which is very personalized, which matters to me for developing my skills, which is relevant And in today's changing times, things that were developed 6 months back today may not be relevant. And finally, which is digestible, given the fact that we are all stretched in on the variable of time, managing home and as well as work. So that's how that's what I feel is a new norm for learning.
Quite interesting. I like the whole concept of Atawad that you mentioned. Anytime, anywhere, any device. But slightly digressing away from the whole structured learning that we've all got, Saurabh, I want to go back to that previous point that you mentioned about not hesitating to fail fast. So moving away from learning platforms that are already in existence, I want to talk about learning from your own experience, because they say the best teacher is your last mistake. So what has been your biggest learning over the years, especially since you're one of those leaders who has always been more accountable to your business more than your HR hierarchy per se?
I would possibly disrupt a lot of thought process here, or I would possibly not be perceived as a very popular one after I say what I'm about to say. But my biggest learning has been that we have been creators and the custodians of people, processes, and technology. However, in our duty to protect people, processes, and technology, we get caught up in our own web. So I have been guilty of, sticking to this idealism and not kind of, being more agile in the whole process. And I would like to support it with a story. So I was, a learning partner to a business, and one of the vice presidents apparently had reached out to me to kind of, do an entire intervention. And it was interesting how I tried repurposing the content which we had already created, because I wanted to kind of increase the consumption. I wanted to show the impact of that content and so on and so forth. Now, what ultimately happened, it did not achieve the desired results. And more so, the content was not relevant. But that's the biggest learning that I have had, that, people, processes, technology do exist and they should be around. We are the custodians, but not to kind of get caught up in our own web while we are protecting that as such.
Very true, Saurabh. Like you said, it's important to fail and fail fast and learn from those mistakes, more importantly.
The exclusive HR podcast by NHRDN in partnership with Timber Media, podcaster for India Inc.
It's interesting also how you mentioned about being agile, Saurabh. You've worked with the mammoth-sized companies like Wipro, and you've also worked with established product companies like McAfee. But after all of these years of experience, now today you're working with a startup, Zeta and Flock. There's so much that's being talked about and written about being agile. Having the experience from both ends of the spectrum, from the big companies to these startups, how important do you think agile is in our HR function? Is it really important, and can it be leveraged irrespective of size or scale?
Absolutely, and I would say it's utmost important today, and it's super important going forward. So I'm a big fan of Ankur Warikoo as well, who is an ex-CEO of Nearby. And very recently, I liked what he spoke about, and that's exactly the philosophy that I resonated for the longest period of my time. We as HR need to treat ourselves as an app or a product. And in any app, as you see, they need to constantly keep on changing, adapt to the user's needs, and, need to be agile. They need to stay relevant as well, so possibly there's a feature out there and maybe, the users don't use that feature at all. And we need to kind of, take that out, or possibly change the work process around that feature. So we need to stay relevant. And most important of all, an app or a product needs to be minimal. If there are too many things, too many widgets, or too many features out there, it's going to confuse the user. Now, if I translate the same thing to our HR function, it's exactly what is the need of the hour, or even going forward. We need to stay agile. We need to challenge our own, created processes or, tools and, anything around it. And at the same point in time, we need to be absolutely minimalistic. If someone reaches out to HR, there should be not more than one or two jumps within the department, and it should be treated as like a one-stop shop. And that's something I've been professing even at Zeta and Flock, that let's revamp the entire learning approach to serving our businesses.
Quite fascinating how you've given us that reference, that analogy of HR being an app, so to say, for our employees. I think the good question to ask ourselves is, have we elevated our roles to being a super app an all-purpose app for our employees so that they can reach out? And are we also that most frequently used app from their point of view? Interesting analogy, Saurabh. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to move on to our next segment, Saurabh. It's the last segment of our podcast. It's called Rapid Fire. I'm going to give you brief one-liner questions, and I want you to give me on-the-spot answers as quick as possible. All right? Are you ready,
Awesome.
Saurabh?
Absolutely. Do I get a hamper at the end of it?
No. Unfortunately, it's all virtual hampers that we'll be sharing with you, Saurabh.
No worries. Go for it.
The rapid fire round.
All right. Your first question. CFO, CHRO, CTO. How would you rate these three roles in order of importance for an organization?
CHRO, CFO, followed by CTO. Do I have to explain?
If you don't mind me asking why, Saurabh?
Sure.
If you don't mind, yeah.
Absolutely. So I believe in today's times, talent is out there, and we need to kind of, again, relook at the way we treat talent, and hence the CHRO presumes the most important role. Financials and, the profit and loss second is important, and hence CFO. And technology is out here to stay, and reinventing will continue to happen. And hence, in the order of where we are today, pre-COVID, COVID, post-COVID, I would keep CTO as the last.
All right. Your next question. One hashtag to describe your HR career thus far.
All right. So, Roger, I have three. And I think
right.
I would like to bounce off all three, because these three have been my mantra. Hashtag I got this. That's my first hashtag, and that's my personal philosophy. Like, you have a people problem, you have a challenge around, talent. I got this, so ownership. Second is
right.
can do, so hashtag can do, which is we should do it. I mean, again, a little bit of accountability, personal accountability here. And third thing is hashtag can't stop, won't stop. And this is about, ensuring that you take it to a success. And these three hashtags have been more or less my personal mantra while I work within learning, HR, or any other functions as such.
Quite a nice mantra, I think, for all of us as HR professionals. All right. Next question, Saurabh. What are the two most important skills you think every HR professional must have?
Interesting, just that since you're limiting me to two, but I'm going to say that you need to have two skills, which I would connect it back to what I said previously. One is learning agility, and second is growth mindset. Learning agility, like I said, we need to constantly reinvent ourselves, learn, unlearn, relearn, and growth mindset to kind of fail fast and fail forward.
All right. One HR leader or business leader that you look up to as your icon.
All right, that's getting difficult. Every time you say one, it's really difficult to point it out. But I can think of two, one as, from the HR fraternity and one from the business fraternity. I would kind of, say my today's CHRO, her name is Margaret D'Souza. The way she operates, I think, is something that I'm fascinated, and I would like to pick up those skills personally as well, as to how to be in tuned with the business, how to be really integrated with the business. And I think that's a constant push. Second leader I can think about is my ex-CFO, wherein his name is Manish, and we work together in a reporting capacity. Being a startup, we never had a formal CHRO then, and I reported into CFO, and the amount of business understanding again that I managed to get from him, with a flavor of how to manage the finances around it. I think that's that's the biggest learning that I've managed to get from a CFO's point of view. Like, how do you run a function? How do you operate the operational challenges using the finances as such? So yeah, these are two leaders I've thoroughly enjoyed working with, and I continue being in touch with them.
Wow, that's really nice. Next question, Saurabh. We spoke a lot about what you must do, what we should do, and what we can do. But this next question is focused on what's the one role or one part of the HR profession you wish you didn't have to do?
That's easy. Okay. I hate the documentation that people have to go through, from an HR point point of view. And if there is anything that can be done to kind of, move things quickly, faster, so on and so forth, I think that would be amazing. And again, the analogy here that I would like to give is how banks have kind of transformed themselves. Earlier days, if you needed to open a bank account, you really needed to go through a long process, and very recently, I've personally experienced it where one of the banks apparently had a pad given out to their sales guy, and all they did was scan just their Aadhaar card, and everything was linked up, and the account was opened up in less than 5 minutes. And imagine that same analogy or same example if it can be used today, right from confidentiality clauses to signing of non-disclosure agreements to filling of the PF forms and so on and so forth. I think life for a new joiner or life for existing employees would be so much easy and simple.
Wow, I hope we are definitely heading in that direction where we incorporate a lot of technology in the field of HR. That's very much needed. I agree. It's interesting how you also mentioned about the CFO playing an important role in helping you understand the finances and all of that. And they say the bottom line is a good yardstick to measure the success of an organization. So, Saurabh, what according to you is the best yardstick to measure the success of an HR team in any organization?
So I'm going to suggest the way we need to approach HR also is like an app or a product again. And the best yardstick for HR's success within the organization should be an NPS score. Now imagine, an employee experiences an HR and is able to rate the HR on an NPS scale and is able to typically go back and recommend it to other employee to say, hey, you have a problem, reach out to our HR. So how likely are you to recommend the function or the app to your peers? I think that would be the best yardstick, for any HR function in the organization.
Absolutely. I guess if Zomato delivery guys and Uber drivers can get a rating, then why not rate your own HR rep as well? Quite an interesting perspective. All right. The next bit. One piece of professional advice you would like to give to yourself 15 years ago.
Very deep question though, Roger. So I'm going to say that most of my career, or the large part of my career, is serendipity, wherein it was trial and error, or the early days of my career have been a lot more around discovering things through trial and errors. One piece of advice that I would give my younger self is seek out mentors early on in life. They help you kind of focus your energies, help you find your expertise, and most important of all, they help you, get the tricks of trade faster rather than, experimenting with by yourself. So, yeah, I mean, I'm going to, say to all people out there as well that reach out to, people, find mentors in them and accelerate faster.
All right. You've given yourself a good dose of advice, and I'm sure you've given all of us listeners also quite a lot to think about. But this final question, Saurabh, you've told us that you love solving people's problems. I'm going to put you on the spot for this last question. What's the one HR or business problem that keeps you up at night?
So a large part of my career I've spent on solving people problems, as you rightly said. Something which is pertaining to that itself is how do you keep your employees productive and continue to develop themselves in today's time? So the problem statement keeps on changing, but what I'm kind of, slightly worried about is with time being stretched, people, having multiple hats to play at home and yet be productive and yet kind of, invest in their own development is something which is kind of, I'm toying around. I'm trying to figure it out, how best to kind of, balance this together. But that's the problem which is keeping me awake, Roger.
All right. Striking that balance, I guess that keeps a lot of us awake at night. So many things to do, and I guess not enough time to do it. It's been fascinating. It's been very insightful talking to you, Saurabh. On behalf of the entire NHRDN community, I thank you for being a part of this edition of Happy Hours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I hope I was able to contribute in some shape.
Absolutely, Saurabh. And to all our listeners, do share your feedback with us and watch out for our next edition of your favorite HR podcast, Happy Hours. I'm your host, Roger Lashe, and until next time, stay safe and stay updated with NHRDN.
Wondering what's the buzz? Then tune into Happy Hours for your dose of all that matters. The exclusive HR podcast by NHRDN in partnership with Timber Media. Podcaster for India Inc.